Next up is I want to set up my server.js file, which will start setting up express.js in our application. So my server.ts file, I will just create one here, and in here I currently don't have my IDE set up to compile my TypeScript for me, but I would like my IDE to do that for me. Remember, you can do this with Visual Studio Code, with Sublime Text, any code editor will be totally fine. I just choose to use WebStorm here because it's one of my favorites. So you can just configure, if you're using WebStorm, you can hit configure and enable our TypeScript compiler. And WebStorm has a bundled 1.8 compiler within it, so set it there, but tell it to use tsconfig instead, so that if anybody is using some other code editor like Visual Studio Code or making use of something like Sublime, can just make use of the tsconfig, so all of you will have the same configuration across projects. And we set up our compiler, and now our IDE is plainly aware, fully aware about our current TypeScript compilation, and you can see it pops up some TypeScript compiler here. If there's any errors, it will pop up here. So for example, if I did type some jargons here that it doesn't understand, our TypeScript compiler will tell us that TSC this expected, so we can see that say it's have some, doesn't know what this is. So we'll just clear that up, and we'll start doing some simple TypeScript installation. So if you remembered, we installed Express.js and we installed some other things, and we would like to set up a simple server, and I would just want to set it up very simple and easy. Here I'll be making use of some things like import, but these imports are just gonna be compiled down to CommonJS. So to do that, we'll import our Express.js Express. Instead of this, we'll use like require it, so I will require my Express, and then next up is our import. I will just say like create a simple Express app, and I'll say the app is equals to Express. We'll just have a simple instantiation of an Express app there, and then next we'll just set up a simple server and say app dot, let's say get, and let's say we're just getting some simple thing like, let's say tests, and we'll set up a handler. It's very easy to set up a simple Express app. It's just a simple function away. It will take a callback. Now this is where Node.js is pretty tricky. We'll need some things called callbacks as our handlers for our routes, and this takes like a simple request and a response. So in here it's taking a request and a response, and we can just send back something and say res.send, and we'll say test successfully called. So this is a simple app level router that we're making use of here, and we can easily start our application by setting the app to listen on a particular port. So let's say our app will be listening on port, let's say 1337, and it will be on local host, and we can give it this listen method takes a callback to check if it successfully started our application. So it's just a function with an error. If there's an error, it will set this error on. So if there's an error, we would like it to console.log it, error starting server, and then we'll just console.log the error there, but we'll just return nothing so that it will end the flow there. So oh sorry, I meant error here, not E. And then next is, if there was no error, I just wanted to console.log and tell me that my server started successfully. So I'll say server started successfully on, let's say, local http /localhost /port 13 on certain port 1337. So it's just to tell us exactly where it started the server. And once we have that been set up, we can see our compiler is automatically compiling it with source maps. Later I'll explain why these source maps are very important. So in here we can see that I will have a simple what is compiling it to. You can see it compiles it to this, and we can see that here we have it just compiles this like var express is equals to express and just plain JavaScript. But if you notice the difference here, it's giving a use strict and also setting this import, it's set it to a var because that's currently what Node.js currently understands. So it's just compiling down to normal common JS, but it's clean and plain. So in here I will not need all of this right now, so we'll just start our server. To start our server, instead I'm not gonna start my www.js, I'm gonna simply start my server.js. So I will just do node server.js, and you can see it successfully started this server. And we'll be making use of Postman to test our REST API. It's just a simple REST API with just one single request handler. So in here, if we'll do something like we'll be hitting localhost, so localhost 1337, so I'll be hitting just a simple route like the test route, which is a get request. If you don't have Postman, you can install it and make some API requests with it. So you can see that we have here, it says test successfully called, which was pretty clean, and you know, it's just a simple REST API server, and it responded with what we wanted it to. But currently this is an app level router. We want to improve on our application and improve more with it as time goes on. Now next up is that we will have move our currently our bin, because this is starting and listening on some particular port, but I would like to export this app somewhere else and then start it separately in another place. So I'm gonna export my current app here, which is simply I will just export it as what an ES6 module. So I'll export default app, and this default app is gonna be like, you know, instead of us to do like import something in a weird way, we're just gonna export it as default. So anytime we require in that file, it will make use of that app. So in here in my www.ts file, we can simply just import our app. We can just use ES6. We can say install app from this and say server, right? And then next is we'll just start our app and say app.listen, but that I will love to do that like just copy it from here. So instead of doing it over again, I will just copy this from here and then I will paste it here. So instead we will not be calling our server.ts to start our application, but instead we'll be calling our www.ts.js. So in here to start the server, now if I do node server.ts server.js, nothing really happens, but because we just started and we're not listening on any port. And now to start it, it will be like node and then to the bin folder and then www.js. So now we can see we can start it here, and we can still make our normal request like as usual and send it, and we can see yeah, it's called test successfully. So that's a simple basic server being set up. Now we can go ahead and, you know, see what we can do more in our app.